Alright, so we are going to be drawing a building in 2-point perspective. So you're going to need a piece of paper, you're going to need a ruler, and you're going to need a pencil. I'm going to be using marker for my drawing so that you can see the lines a little easier. But remember, when I'm using the orange marker, that means that you are going to be drawing lightly with your pencil, because those are lines that you're going to erase some or all of them in the end. And then when I'm using the black marker, that's when you can press a little bit harder. Those are going to be final lines that will stay when you're done. Okay? So we're going to start by drawing the horizon line. The horizon line is where the ground and the sky meet. It doesn't have to be exactly perfectly straight. The ground's not perfectly flat. So somewhere towards the middle of your paper, you're going to draw a line that goes across it. And then I'm going to create a line for the middle of my building that goes as straight up and down as I can. So I'm going to try to line up my ruler as best I can to make it straight up and down. And then I'm going to draw my building, and you can decide how high you want it to go, but just don't have it go all the way off your paper and don't have it too close to your horizon line. Somewhere in between. And then how low you want it to go is also up to you, but again, not too close to the horizon line, not too close to the bottom of your paper. So you can decide that. The next thing I need is I need to draw my vanishing points. So we are doing 2-point perspective, which means there are going to be 2 vanishing points. So I'm going to draw one over on this side of my paper and one on this side of my paper. Don't make them too big, because if you make them huge, it's going to make it so that you can't line things up as easily. So don't make them too big, but big enough that you can see them. So now I'm going to draw the lines for the top of my building and the bottom of my building, and they're going to go and touch the vanishing point. They always have to point back to that vanishing point. The ones on the left side are going to point to the left vanishing point. The ones on the right side are going to point to the right vanishing point. So again, I'm using the orange pencil, or the orange marker, which means you need to draw lightly with your pencil, and you're going to go from that top line to the middle of your vanishing point. The very top to the middle of your vanishing point, and use the ruler. It needs to be straight. So there's the top line, and then I'm going to do the same on the bottom. It's going to point to the same vanishing point because it's on the same side. So here we go. I've got one side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go from the top to the middle of the other vanishing point, and from the bottom to the middle of that vanishing point. Again, you make sure you use your ruler and draw lightly, because part of this will be erased when you're done. Alright, so now I have, this is the corner of the building that's closest to me, and then these are the top and bottom lines for the roof and where the ground meets the building. Now I'm going to decide how wide I want my building to be. So if I want it skinny and tall, I'll make it right here. If I want it wide, I can move it over here. If I want it really wide, I can move it over here. If I want it super wide, I can move it way over here. So the closer to the vanishing point that you make this next line, the wider your building is going to be. The further away from the vanishing point, the skinnier your building is going to be. So if I want to make a skyscraper, I would draw the line close. If I want to make something like the library or the school that's a little bit wider and shorter building, I would draw it parallel to this line. Parallel means
that it's running the same as it would never run into it, because they run exactly the same side by side. So parallel to that one, I'm going to make mine kind of a wider building. I'm going to move this over, try to get it as straight up and down as possible so your building's not leaning. And then I'm going to draw the other side, and this side I'll make pretty wide, but not quite as wide, I guess. A little bit smaller than the other side, because your buildings don't have to be the same width on both sides. You could make, one side really skinny and the other side really long, or vice versa. Again, it should be parallel to this line, so make it as straight up and down as possible. So now this is the corner closest to me, and these two are the corners on the other sides of the building. So I'm going to take and very carefully trace over this top line and this top line, and I'm stopping when I get to those vertical lines I drew. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here, trace over
just between the vertical lines that I drew. I'm not going all the way to my horizon line. So now these lines out here, the top two and the bottom ones, you can erase. And then the horizon line is going to stay, so you can actually make that darker if you want. But the one that's inside the building, you wouldn't be able to see because there's a building there. So you could actually erase that inside of there too. So that's the basic outline of the building. So now you need to add the details to make it look like whichever building you chose. So you're going to add things like windows and doors, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So first thing you need to know is that the lines on the building that go up and down, the vertical lines, are always going to be straight up and down. They're not going to lean one way or the other. They're always going to be straight up and down. No matter what, you're going to make sure they're straight up and down for all your windows and doors. When you're making the lines that go side to side, you are always going to draw those horizontal lines pointing to the vanishing point. So all of the ones on this side, the left side, will point to this vanishing point. All of the windows and doors on this side are going to point to this vanishing point, the right vanishing point. So let's start by drawing a row of windows. So I'm drawing an orange. Make sure it's nice and light because you want to be able to erase these if you make a mistake, or a lot of times you make them a little too wide or a little too skinny or a little too tall and you need to erase part of it. So make sure you're drawing lightly in the beginning, then you can darken it in when you have it correct, okay? So I'm going to draw two sets of windows here. So I'm going to draw one line there and one line here, and they're both pointing to that vanishing point. So the horizontal lines always have to point to that vanishing point. And then I'm going to draw the bottom edge. So I'm going to bring this down a little, and I'm going to draw the bottom edge. And so if you need to, you can actually draw the line all the way across and then just erase the parts that you don't want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just draw it where they need to be, and then I can erase the little extra parts. So now I have two long rectangular windows, but I need to show that they're windows. Right now they're just lines. So I'm going to take my ruler, and these lines are all going to be straight up and down, and they're going to be parallel to each other. So they always need to be as straight up and down as possible. So I'm going to draw this side right here, and I'm going to draw this side right here. And then you can see I've got a little extra here. I would have to erase the little pieces that stick out the side there. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, draw straight up and down, and straight up and down parallel to that vertical line we drew before. So now you can see I have these long skinny windows, and I can trace back over these parts and make them dark so you can see the orange parts you would erase, the black parts are the parts that are going to stay. So you can see how those windows look like they're getting smaller as they get further away because they're going towards that vanishing point. I made that one a little crooked when I traced it. So now you can add details to those windows, like maybe I want to draw a little bit, like I want to draw like the window, the inside frame, like this. And I'll draw some lines that go up and down vertically and make sure that they're as straight up and down as I can get them. I'll do the same thing in this window, straight up and down as I can get them. So that's how you do a window. So if I want to do a window on this side, I'd follow the same step. So I would draw my line. I'm going to start off light. I'm going to make just one window on this side because this side's not quite as wide. I'm going to make one line there and one line there. And then I'm going to use my ruler and make them go straight up and down for the sides. And then I can trace back over darker when I know it's where I want it. Try to keep them nice and straight. And then I can add this line that goes sideways, and again, any line that goes horizontal, side to side, has to point to the vanishing point. And any line that goes vertically has to be parallel to those first ones. It should be straight up and down. Straight up and down, make it parallel. So now I have windows on both sides of my building. And now we're going to make doors. So doors are very similar to windows. The lines that go horizontal, again, have to line up with that vanishing point. So I'm going to draw a door that's this tall right here, kind of a wide door. And then I'm going to draw the line up and down. Again, it's going to go straight up and down. And again, straight up and down over here. So this kind of confuses some people because they think, well, this side's shorter than this side. But if you're looking at something that's close to you, it's going to seem taller than when it's further away. So even though this is the same height all the way across, it seems taller and shorter. So I'm going to make this kind of like a garage door almost, like a metal door, like a big one, because it's pretty wide. So I'm going to draw horizontal lines, but I know those horizontal lines have to line up with that vanishing point. So all the way up, I'm going to keep that vanishing point, and I'm going to keep doing those lines and always have that ruler pointing to that vanishing point. So it makes the lines on the door. And then I have my building. Maybe I want to add some brick or some siding to it. So any line that's horizontal is going to be pointing to that vanishing point. So I'm going to make some lines going this way. I'm going to make this one line up with the top of the door. I'm going to make sure that ruler is pointing to that vanishing point the whole time. It should always be pointing to that vanishing point. Always, always. And don't just eyeball it. Make sure it's really pointing there, because if you try to eyeball it and you don't line it up quite right, it's going to make your whole picture seem just a little bit off. Alright, so I've got some lines there. So now I'm going to go up to the top here and add some lines. Again, they're pointing to that vanishing point there. Always pointing to the vanishing point. So all these lines are pointing to that vanishing point. So now I'm going to have siding going all the way up here. So if I have all of these lines pointing to that left vanishing point, which vanishing point will the lines on the other side of the building point to? They are going to point to that right vanishing point. Exactly. So now I'm going to draw the same lines on the other side, and I can have them meet right in the middle, so I can actually start my line there and end it on that vanishing point. And I can stop it when it gets to the edge of the building. So always pointing to that vanishing point. No matter what, those lines, those horizontal lines, are going to point to a vanishing point every time. So make sure you line it up every time. I know it seems like it takes a while, but it'll make your picture look so much better when you're done if all those lines really line up. And again, you can draw lightly in the beginning if you want to make sure that you have them the way you want them, and then you can erase anything that isn't quite right. So I'm almost done drawing the siding on here. But not every building is going to have siding, right? In fact, a building like this that's this big and has like a warehouse door on it like that is not going to have siding on it probably. It's probably going to be brick, right? So if I want this to be brick instead of siding, so right now it looks like a siding or it's got lines on it or something like that. If I want it to look like brick, I'm going to start adding vertical lines. So when I add vertical lines, I know that they have to be parallel to the other lines and as straight up and down as possible. So a lot of people tend to make them lean sideways one way or the other. You want to make sure they're straight up and down. So if I'm making bricks, I'm going to make them straight up and down, and I'm actually going to skip every other row in order to make them look like bricks. And then I'll move it over and I'll do the same thing on the opposite rows. And there's my door, so I'm not going to go there. I'll move it over and do the same thing on the opposite rows. And then move it over and do the same thing on the opposite rows. Move it over and do the same thing on the opposite rows. So the bricks are actually, oops, I missed one right there. The bricks are going to be opposite for where they are because they overlap each other. So there's some that are each one. So just like that, you can continue going if you want to make bricks on your building. And once you've done it quite a bit, you can stop using the ruler as long as you make sure they're parallel. And you can start just drawing them, but you have to make sure they're straight up and down. They're not leaning one way or the other. If you notice they look like they're starting to lean, you can go back to using your ruler and make sure you get them all correct. Every other one. That brick line. And then you could do the same thing on the other side to make bricks over there. And then if you want, you can, the bricks are different colors, so if you were going to color this in, you could make them different colors, or you could shade it in with different colors. So I'm going to make my bricks on the other side, and you can go ahead and add your details however you want. If you're going to leave it siding, if you're going to do bricks. Remember, think about that, whichever building you chose that you're drawing, you want to try to make it look like that building as best you can. So I'm going to draw all my bricks, and you can do the same. Start adding details to yours, whatever you think looks best. Doesn't have to be the same as mine. You're drawing your building, not my building. So there I've got my bricks. I've got my windows. I've got my door. So now my door and my windows are starting to kind of blend in. So I'm going to add a little, I'm going to make it a little bit thicker around the edge of my door so you can tell it's different from the rest. I'm going to do the same thing on the windows. I'm going to make it a little thicker on there. Or if you're going to use colors, you could go through and color them a little different color. Darken them up a bit so you can see them a little more. So you're adding all those details to your picture. So now I have my building. I'm going to start adding some details around it. So I'm going to show you how to add like a sidewalk out front and a road and things like that. So first of all, for the sidewalk, I'm going to start by, the sidewalk will go right up to the edge of the building. So I'm going to draw my line to my vanishing point. Again, the left side goes to the left vanishing point, and the right side goes to the right vanishing point. And then I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to lower it a little bit. So the right side goes to the right side and the left side goes to the left side, and they're going to meet in the middle. Just like that. So I have a sidewalk, and then I know that the sidewalk has a little bit of a curb. So what I'm going to do is make a line that goes straight up and down right here. Just a short, teeny little one. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the vanishing point from the bottom of that line. So towards the back, it might kind of start to actually touch almost, but not quite. So just go right like that. You can see how it starts off a little wider and gets skinnier because it's going towards that vanishing point. Everything disappears towards that vanishing point. And do the same thing on the other side. So now I have the sidewalk with a little bit of a curb. And now I'm going to show you how to add those lines like on the sidewalk where it's got the little squares, so it'll look like a sidewalk. So I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to draw this line from the vanishing point all the way so it goes off and touches the other side of the sidewalk. Just like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So it's going to start here, it's going to go off the edge, just like that. And again, it's your choice if you want to add a sidewalk. This is just an option, but I thought I would show you in case you wanted one. So now I'm going to keep going, but this is where it gets a little bit tricky because this whole time we've been doing all of our lines on the left side go to the left vanishing point, and all of the lines on the right side go to the right vanishing point. But now these ones, because they're laying flat on a surface instead of on a wall, they're going to point to the opposite vanishing point. So these ones, I'm going to draw, my next square is going to go to my right vanishing point from over here. So I'm going to start on the outside of my sidewalk, and it's going to go as if it's going to that vanishing point, but I stop when I hit the building. And I'm going to do it again. And then I'm going to move my thing again, make sure it's touching that vanishing point. I'm going to draw another one. And again, make sure it's touching that vanishing point, and draw another one. Make sure it's touching that vanishing point, and draw another one. And I'm going to keep going until I run out of sidewalk to draw the squares on. And you're going to notice that your squares are starting to get smaller and smaller and look less and less like squares the further back you get. They're going to seem like they're closer together the further they get towards the vanishing point. So that's as far as I can go. So now you can see I've got all these squares going back towards the vanishing point. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I've got my vanishing point, and I'm going to make the line come over to make the square. And then I'm going to do the same thing. It's lined up on that vanishing point. I'm going to turn it and draw the next line. Make sure that that's always touching that vanishing point. I'm going to do the same thing again. Make sure it's touching that vanishing point. Do the same thing again. Keep it on that vanishing point, do the same thing again, and I'm just going to keep going until I run out of sidewalk. Again, those squares are going to seem closer and closer together, and they're going to seem like they're less and less square shaped. I'm going to keep going, make sure that it's always pointing to that vanishing point. I think that's the last square I can draw. So now I have my sidewalk going both directions. And then usually if you have a sidewalk, you want the road next to it. So to make the road, I'm going to do the same thing I did before, start with those vanishing points, and I'm going to draw them all the way until they go right off the edge of the paper. So I'm going to go from that vanishing point. I want my road to be a little wider than my sidewalk, right? The roads are usually wider than your sidewalks are. So I'm going to draw it way over here, and draw a road like that right off the edge of my paper. Same thing on this side. I'm going to draw it nice and wide so it looks like a nice wide road. Coming from the vanishing point, it's going to go right off the edge of my paper. So I've got my roads, my sidewalk. If I want it to look like a road, I can add those dashed lines down the middle like a road would have. So I can do right down the middle, I can do a dotted line. I can do the same thing on the other side. Dashed line right down that middle. quite a bit of detail there. Maybe I'll add some trees in the background or some plants over here. Maybe I'll add tree like this. And then I'm going to add another one, but as they get further away, they're going to get smaller. And actually, if you want to know how much smaller, you can draw a line from the top of this tree to that vanishing point. And I'm going to draw it with orange because you'll erase it. But you can see that's how tall your trees will be. So now my next tree shouldn't be any taller than that vanishing point. And they get smaller and smaller as they go back further and further. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. I want some trees over there. So I'm going to draw an orange line for where the tops of those trees would be, because that's a nice light line you can erase later. And then I'm going to draw those trees nice and big up close, and as they get further away they get smaller and smaller, shorter and shorter, following that vanishing line right off to that vanishing point. So you can keep adding all kinds of details to your picture, keep adding anything that would make it look more like the building you created. And then you can start adding some fun things of your own. Maybe you want to add, you know, an airplane in the sky, or a superhero flying over it, or a UFO flying by. Add all kinds of things to it. Maybe you're going to have like a sea creature coming over the top of the building and crawling down the side. Use your imagination and add your own details to it and make it look like you want it to look. I'm going to keep adding details to mine, and you can keep adding details to yours. And then you can color it in or shade it in however you think it would look best. Just remember when you're adding in those details to keep using those vanishing points.